Look, as you said, I should avoid things that make me sad.
Mkwelewa. Hata tunajaribu sana mimi na dadu watu faisa.
Sasa katika mimi na wewe, mwenye roho mbaya ni nani?
Hii kichoko changu ni cha huruma hii.
Haya naofanya ni sawa, ama napoteza muda wangu kwa mambo yasiyokuwa na maana. Naona uzito kwenye moyo wangu, sina raha kabisa Kombo.
Uzito gani tena?
I'll be back before 4. Make sure I find you here.
George, and by the way, I saw a second ticket in your office. Who are you going with?
Come on, what's going on here?
It's good to know his weight, ndio nijue kama nitamweza.
Kama wanaume, tukae chini kama wanaume. Wewe na dadako by the way, hamutakuja mimi kuninyanyasa.
Makofi, for the 2 days you came earlier than anyone else.
Never mind.
You think by working exceptionally well, you're doing the company and your boss a favor?
By the respective partner states legislatures in accordance with their parliamentary procedures for a term of 5 years that are where the East African Legislative Assembly Elections Act 2011 contemplates conclusion of the election of members of a new assembly to be within 90 days before the expiry of the term of the subsisting assembly, that the term of the current East African Legislative Assembly lapses on December 17th, and cognizant of the need to urgently conclude the election process for the East African Legislative Assembly to commence transacting business for the East African community, that the House, in accordance to provisions of the House of Parliament joint sitting rules, that the House resolves on a number of issues. 1, to establish a joint committee consisting of 7 members appointed by each of the Houses of Parliament to undertake the functions contemplated under the East African Legislative Assembly elections. And 2, that following members that are listed should or shall represent the National Assembly in the joint committee. The members include Honorable Wanjiku Muhiem, the Honorable Dr. Makali Mulu, the Honorable Sabina Chege, the Honorable John Mutunga Kanyuithia, the Honorable Daniel Nanok Epuyo, the Honorable Francis Sigei Kipyegon, and the Honorable Ruth Adhiambo. These are the 7 members that have been appointed by each of the Houses of Parliament to undertake the functions contemplated under the East African Legislative Assembly elections or election of members of the Assembly Rules 2017. And that the offices of the clerks of the Houses of Parliament shall provide secretariat services to the Joint Committee in accordance with the standing orders. And finally, that the Joint Committee shall report to the House within the timelines stipulated in the East African Legislative Assembly elections or election of members of the Assembly Rules 2017. So this is a motion that is in the first business on the order of the day, that members will be considering the appointment of a joint committee on election of members to IALA, a motion that will be moved by the leader of the majority party. This afternoon, there is also a notification by the Speaker, a notification of short recess from the 14th to the 24th of October 2022, that pursuant to standing orders relating to the calendar of the Assembly and resolutions of the House on Wednesday, 12th of October, the year 2022, the Speaker notifies that upon the rise of the House at the appointed time today, regular sittings will resume on Tuesday, the 25th of October, 2022 at 2:30 p.m. That is a notification that members will be given this afternoon. At the entrance or in the chambers already, the Speaker, Honorable Moses Wetangula, is in. He will be presiding over this afternoon sitting. I will now hand you over for this live broadcast that is brought to you by the Parliamentary Broadcasting Unit or rather in partnership with Kenya Broadcasting Corporation. My name is Kamche Menza. Good afternoon.
Waheshimiwa na tuombe. Ewe Mwenyezi Mungu ambaye kwa hekima na wema wako umeteua nyadhifa za viongozi na wa mabunge kwa ustawi wa jamii na utawala wa haki wa wanadamu. Twakusihi ututazame kwa neema nyingi sisi watumishi wako ambao wameridhika kutuita ili tutekeleze shughuli muhimu za jamhuri yetu. Twakuomba uteremshie baraka zako sisi tuliokutanika hapa na utujalie tuyatende na kufikiria mambo yote yatakayofikishwa mbele yetu kwa njia ya haki na uaminifu, ili utukufu na sifa zako ziendelezwe na ili kustawisha amani, ufanisi na heri ya nchi yetu na wale ambao haja zao umezikabidhi mikononi mwetu. Amina. We have quorum, so we can proceed. Clerk.
Order number 1, administration of oath. Order number 2, communication from the chair. Order number 3, messages. Order number 4, petitions. Order number 5, papers. Order number 6, notices of motion.
The member for Kwanza. The Honorable Ferdinand Wanyonyi, MP.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I beg to give notice of motion that aware that Article 68C, so Article 1 of the Constitution of Kenya, provides for the minimum and maximum holding acreage in respect to private land, deeply concerned that with the high population growth and the demand for the land have resulted into excessive fragmentation of land into an economical unit, noting that at the same time the number of people own large tracts of land which are not utilized optimally, noting that further the equivalent of the fact that the Constitution in Article 60 set out in the principles of the land policy, which among other things require that land in Kenya shall be held, used and managed in a manner that is equitable, efficient, productive and sustainable. This House therefore resolves that the government enforces compliance of the Article 68C(1) of the Constitution in Section 158 of the Land Act 2012, and that the National Land Policy Sessional Paper number 3 of 2009 on the maximum and the minimum land holdings in Kenya, through the publishing of the rules and regulation for the private land use and management in regard to the minimum and maximum land holdings in Kenya. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Member for Lurambi, Honorable Titus Hamala, MP.
Thank you. Thank you, Honorable Speaker. I beg to give notice of the following motion. That aware that education is key enabler for national development and realization of Kenya's Vision 2030 and sustainable development goals, appreciating the invaluable role that teachers play in actualizing the national goals of education, and also noting that conducive working environment for teachers enhances performance, recalling that the localization of teachers commenced in 2018 by the Teacher Service Commission immensely disrupted teachers' lives, lowered teachers' morale, and caused untold trauma to many teachers countrywide. Concerned that the exercise is not supported with clear policy framework and was initiated without the participation of teachers or their unions, contrary to Articles 118 and 132 of the Constitution on public participation and involvement of the people in the process of policy making, and cognizant of the fact that the localization of teachers is inconsistent with UNESCO teacher deployment practice, which treats education as culture process conducted within a people's culture context at the local level. This House urges the Teacher Service Commission to immediately reverse the localization of teachers and initiate a comprehensive review of teacher deployment policy with the involvement of teachers in order to make the policy consistent with ILO and UNESCO laws and practice on teacher management and deployment. Thank you, Honorable Speaker.
Next order.
Order number 7, questions and statements.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. Honorable Speaker, pursuant to the provisions of Standing Order 44-2A, I rise to give the following statement on behalf of the House Business Committee, which met on Tuesday, 11th October 2022 in the afternoon following its formation to prioritize business for consideration. Honorable Speaker, members will recall that yesterday, Wednesday, 12th October 2022, in accordance to the provision of Standing Order number 28, this House approved the calendar of the National Assembly for the regular sessions for the first session. Therefore, the House is now scheduled to proceed for its recess tomorrow, Friday, 14th October 2022, and resume the regular sittings on Tuesday, the 25th of October 2022. Honorable Speaker, for the information of members, during the recess, the Committee on Appointments is expected to undertake the vetting of persons nominated to the positions of Cabinet Secretaries, Attorney General, and the Secretary to the Cabinet, and table its report on this matter when we resume regular sittings. Further, the Committee on Selection will also be considering the placement of members in the various parliamentary committees. Honorable Speaker, this will therefore be a working recess for many of us, those of us who sit in the Appointments and the Selections Committee. I urge the House to be patient as these processes are ongoing and take the opportunity of this short break to connect, as we said yesterday, with our families and our constituents, and do what we called bonding yesterday with both our families and our constituents following the elections we had, and many of us have not had an opportunity to get back to our constituents, and for some, maybe even back to their families. Finally, Honorable Speaker, the House Business Committee will reconvene on the 25th of October 2022 to schedule the business for the week of resumption of the House. I now wish to lay this statement on the table of the House, Honorable Speaker. Thank you.
Order number 8, motion, appointment of a joint committee on election of members to IALA.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. And I beg to move the following motion, that acknowledging that the East African Legislative Assembly, IALA, is established under Article 9 of the Treaty for the Establishment of the East African Community as one of the key organs and institutions of the community responsible for the community's legislative matters. Recognizing Article 50 of the treaty provides for the election of members of IALA by respective partner states' legislatures in accordance with their parliamentary procedures for a term of 5 years. Further aware that the East African Legislative Assembly Elections Act of 2011 contemplates conclusion of the election of members of a new assembly to be within 90 days before the expiry of the term of the subsisting assembly, and noting that the term of the current East African Legislative Assembly lapses on the 17th of December this year. Cognizant of the need to urgently conclude the election process for the East African Legislative Assembly to commence transacting business of the East African community, now therefore in accordance with the provisions of Rule 9 of the Houses of Parliament Joint Sittings Rules, the House resolves the following. 1. To establish a joint committee consisting of 7 members appointed by each of the Houses of Parliament to undertake the functions contemplated under the East African Legislative Assembly elections, election of members of the Assembly Rules of 2017. 2, that the following members shall represent the National Assembly in the joint committee. 1, the Honorable Wanjiku Muhia, MP, who is designated as a co-chairperson. 2, the Honorable John Mutunga Kanyuithia, MP. 3, the Honorable Daniel Nanok Epuyo, MP. 4, the Honorable Francis Sigei Kipiegon, MP. 6, the Honorable Ruth Adhiambo Busia, MP. I think that's Adhiambo Busia, MP. 7, the Honorable Dr. Makali Mulu, MP. And finally, the Honorable Sabina Chege, MP. Honorable Speaker, with your indulgence, I just need to confirm one of the names again. Yeah, because in my notes, not Busia is the Honorable Francis Igei, who had been repeated, but it's okay on the order paper. 3, that the officers of the clerks of the Houses of Parliament shall provide secretariat services to the joint committee in accordance with the standing orders. And 4, that the joint committee shall report to the House within the timeline stipulated in the East African Legislative Assembly's election of members of the Assembly Rules 2017. Honorable Speaker, as I've stated in a motion, the East African Legislative Assembly, or IALA, is the independent legislative arm of our East African community that was established under Article 9 of the EAC Treaty. And Honorable Speaker, as members are aware, and maybe for the benefit of our new members, we have 9 members who are elected by each partner state, and Kenya being a partner state in the community, we are to elect these 9 members. And the purpose of this joint committee is to guide us through the process of electing these members. And that's why you see we have representation from across the political divide, representing all our parliamentary political parties. And of course, we assume that the interests of the non-parliamentary political parties are catered for under our coalitions. But the list of names that we have submitted, Honorable Speaker, has representation from all our political parties that are parliamentary political parties. Honorable Speaker, the Assembly plays a very critical role in furtherance of the EAC objectives, such as 1, liaising with national assemblies of partner states on matters relating to the community; debating and approving the budget of the community. 3, considering of annual reports on the activities of the community, annual audit reports, and any other reports referred to. 4, discussing all matters referred to regarding the community and making recommendations as it may deem necessary for the implementation of the community treaty. Honorable Speaker, Rule 9 of the Houses of Parliament for joint sittings, as I said, establishes a joint committee by way of a motion, which is the motion that we've just tabled, and it consists of membership from both houses. This list that we are approving here is that of the National Assembly, and the other house will also have their list, and that's why we have designated the Honorable Wanjiku Muhia, who is not only a ranking member of the House, but is also an immediate former member of the IALA Legislative Assembly. So she's very well versed with the affairs of IALA and the provisions of the treaty and what needs to be done. Therefore, Honorable Speaker, as I mentioned earlier, the term of the 4th Assembly, that the Honorable Wanjiku Muhia, the Honorable Jamatia, who is also here, comes to an end on the 17th of December this year, and the 5th Assembly is expected to commence its sittings early in the year 2023. Therefore, Honorable Speaker, members will note that the Parliament of Kenya is required to conduct the election of its members to IALA latest by the 17th of December 2022. However, the elections were not carried out immediately as the 12th Parliament ended on the 10th of June. Members, you remember we took our sine die recess or adjournment in June, and we could not carry out the elections for the members who would have replaced the outgoing members. And therefore, this 13th Parliament is required to urgently conclude this process for the East African Legislative Assembly to commence transacting its business and to avoid the scenario that we witnessed in the last elections of members of the Assembly in 2017. And I think we are well within time, but it's very important that before we take our recess now, from tomorrow, we have this committee so that they may also, as the other two committees, the Committee on Appointments and the Committee on Selections are working, they may also now reconstitute themselves and begin to prepare the timetable and the program that will guide us into the elections for us to come back and conduct the elections. They will also guide us on when they will advertise and the entire timetable of the election program for us to be able to come back and elect our new members to IALA. Therefore, with the passage of this motion and that in the Senate, Honorable Speaker, it may as well serve as notice to those who are out there, because nobody seated here will be electable to IALA. But I know there are very many, even of our colleagues who are within the 12th Parliament who are interested in IALA, in sitting in IALA. Therefore, they may as well be notified through the passage of this motion that the process has begun, and they can therefore begin their campaigns to when they are allowed by the committee, as they will be guided by the committee. Honorable Speaker, with those very many remarks, I beg to move, and I will ask the Honorable Leader of the Minority, the Honorable Pio Wandai, to second this motion. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Mr. Speaker, I wish to second the motion for the adoption of the 6 names to form part of the committee, the joint committee that will oversee the elections of members to the IALA. Without really belaboring the point, we cannot gainsay the importance of IALA in a wider context of our desire as East Africans to eventually end up within one political federation. So it is in our interest that the East Africa Legislative Assembly continues to play its rightful role and continues to get strengthened so that as East Africans we eventually bring down all these artificial barriers that divide our peoples. Mr. Speaker, it's also important that we go about these elections properly, in the proper manner, as envisaged by the treaty, of the East African Community. It is on record, Mr. Speaker, that previously, when we didn't get it right, the courts had to intervene. Indeed, the East Africa Court of Justice, in the Professor Anyang' Nyong'o case, did settle the matter of how to go about electing members to EALA by respective partner states. So this House, by approving these names this afternoon, would have played its role, its part, in ensuring that we abide by the rules, we abide by the treaty, and we abide by our own statute to ensure that we eventually end up with names of persons who will be elected to EALA representing Kenya as a partner state. And all these seven names do qualify. They are honorable members who are properly equipped with the capacity to steer this process, this very important process. So without further ado, Mr. Speaker, I do second.
Honorable members, I propose the question that acknowledging that the East African Legislative Assembly, EALA, is established under Article 9 of the Treaty for the Establishment of the East African Community as one of the key organs and institutions of the community responsible for the community's legislative matters, recognizing that Article 50 of the treaty provides for the election of members of EALA by respective partner states' legislatures in accordance with their parliamentary procedures for a term of 5 years, further aware that the East African Legislative Assembly Elections Act 2011 contemplates conclusion of the election of members of a new assembly to be within 90 days before the expiry of the term of the subsisting assembly, noting that the term of the current East African Legislative Assembly lapses on December 17th, 2022, cognizant of the need to urgently conclude the election process for the East African Legislative Assembly to commence transacting business of the East African Community. Now, therefore, in accordance with the provision of Rule 9 of the House of Parliament Joint Sittings Rules, the House resolves 1. To establish a joint committee consisting of 7 members appointed by each of the Houses of Parliament to undertake the functions contemplated under the East African Legislative Assembly election of members of the Assembly Rules 2017. 2. That the following members shall represent the National Assembly in the joint committee. A. The Honorable Wanjiku Muhia MP as co-chairperson. The Honorable Dr. Makali Mul CBS MP. The Honorable Sabina Chege CBS MP. The Honorable John Mutunga Kanyuithia MP. The Honorable Daniel Nanok Epuyo MP. The Honorable Francis Sigei Kipyegon EBS MP. And the Honorable Ruth Adhiambo. They have written as Busia, but I'm told, is it correct? Because I was told to apologize for calling you Busia. But if it's your name, then we leave it there. The Honorable Ruth Adhiambo Busia MP. And 3, that the officers of the clerks of the Houses of Parliament shall provide secretariat services to the joint committee in accordance with the standing orders. And 4, that the joint committee shall report to the House within the timelines stipulated in the East African Legislative Assembly elections, election of members of the Assembly Rules 2017. Now, before we open the debate, honorable members, allow me to acknowledge the following visiting schools in the public gallery: St. Teresa's Primary School from Kericho County, Karugia Secondary School from Murang'a County, Katwala Secondary School from Kitui County, and Jabali Christian School from Nairobi County, seated in the Speaker's Gallery. On my own behalf and on your behalf as the House, we welcome the visiting schools to the House of Parliament. Thank you. This matter is too important to truncate it that way. We need you to...
Thank you, Honorable.
And as the Honorable Wanjiku Muya speaks, we have honorable members with physical challenges who sit at the back. Sometimes your cards do not appear on the screen because of the sheer number. Like now we have 78, and only about 20 do appear. Other members walk all the way here to lobby for recognition. In the event any one of you wants to speak, send one of the sergeants to come and inform the chair. Wanjiku, proceed.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker, for giving me the opportunity to speak on this very important motion, which happens to come from my area, which I have just concluded the term in Yala. Allow me to, because this is my maiden speech, to thank the people of Kipipiri for electing me and making a statement to this country that it is no longer about the big names, it's no longer about the money, it's no longer about deep state, the chiefs or Nyumbakumi that will stop the voice of Wanjiku to vote for Wanjiku. And for that, I want to confirm to them that surely their vote was their choice. As it goes, my vote, my choice, and I'm ready to serve them, considering that Kipipiri is one of the least developed, possibly in the whole of Mount Kenya. Speak of roads, we have pathetic roads. Speak of water, we do not have water. Speak of electricity, connectivity, we are lagging behind and we are still in darkness, in spite of us having had very, very great leaders as the representative of Kipipiri. Having said that, I want to say that during campaign we saw the contractors build roads day and night. And for the last 1 month, Honorable Speaker, you see a road which was moving very fast is not going on. I don't know where the money was then, that the money is not there today. I want to ask the
Honorable Wanjiku Muya. I don't know what that has that got to do with Iyala.
I said it's my maiden speech.
I would forgive you.
I stand guided.
I would forgive you, other members. I would forgive you if you are coming to this house for the first time. You are not a new member.
I was on a commercial break, though a regional break.
So
but I stand guided, Honorable Speaker, but I wanted to sneak a caution to SS contractors to do faster in the roads that are really not moving in Kipipiri. Having said that, I want members to support the members selected in handling this matter, confirming to this House that I'm aware that all partner states in the region have already concluded the election of their members. Secondly, I want to remind members that on 2017, the partner state Kenya delayed Iyala to start the activities for a full 6 months. All partner states had elected their members. Kenya had not because of the political issues that we had. And as the treaty speaks of quorum in the house in Iyala, that no business can transact if a partner state does not have 3 members present in the house. For that reason, Iyala could not transact for 6 months and members really struggled. For that reason, I would ask that we fast track this. It is 90 days, and according to Iyala Act Section 12, it requires the Parliament to make their own rules of conducting the election. In that case, I want to commend the House Business Committee and your office, Honorable Speaker, for electing me as the co-chair. Matters of the region are very pertinent to this community. And I want to say that once this election is concluded, I want to urge this House to try and also integrate with the IALA. Many times we do serious business in IALA, like audit report. We do serious transaction there, but we are not able to connect with the parliaments in our partner states. Unlike other countries like Uganda, like Kenya, you will find an audit report has been put on the House. We have made serious recommendation. A member of this region or even from Kenya was handling a certain institution like Kasoa. The same member who is named and shamed and is supposed to take responsibility is appointed in our partner states, even in Kenya, to handle another very serious institution, just because there is no linkage between IALA and the parliaments, particularly in Kenya. So with that, I want to support. I know the process, and you know we are headed to the fourth pillar of regional integration. Just to mention, we are already done with the custom union. We are already done with the common market. We are almost handling the monetary union, where our members, I want to inform you, but I know you may be aware, that we shall soon have 1 shilling in the whole region of East Africa. We shall not have Tanzania shilling. We shall not have Uganda shilling. We shall be having a common currency. And as Kenya, we are lobbying to have the Central Bank of East Africa here in Kenya. So these are matters of our interest as leaders or representatives of the people. Finally, the fourth pillar is the political federation, where we aspire to have 1 nation in the whole region. And for that reason, I want to urge members as I conclude that as we do the election, let's find people of quality who can transact and take care of the interests of our country. And Kenya has been accused many times, honorable members and honorable speaker, that we are the only country who sweep the whole 9 members and bring 9 members who are new. As you are aware, 4 of us are already elected in this house. Myself, Honorable Jematia, Honorable Aburi, and Honorable Oburu at Senate. Kenya is known to sweep the 9 members, and we leave no institutional memory. If you look at Uganda and all other nations, you find they leave 50% of members. At least for this election, let's leave a member or 2 for institutional memory so that our interests are also taken care of. With that, I thank you, Honorable Speaker. I'm humbled to be elected to chair this committee, and I thank you for appointing me.
The Honorable Member for Bondo, Dr. Ochanda.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, as we discussed the whole issue of placing our members to IALA, I think there are 1 or 2 things that I wanted to raise, some of which I've raised before in this House, Mr. Speaker, and in one way or the other, some of them have not been addressed. Mr. Speaker, IALA is a parliament, and in Arusha it also has, we also have the secretariat of the community. Apparently that community executes and implements a lot of projects, and a lot more of those projects are funded many times not from the community but from outside. Mr. Speaker, the point I'm trying to bring here is that these projects apparently are executed in the national or in the individual counties. Like in Kenya, we have had many of the projects that are community projects. They are implemented in Kenya, but when they are being implemented in Kenya, they are implemented by MDAs, our own MDAs. They are implemented by our ministries. They are implemented by all our agencies, the national agencies that we have. In the end, Mr. Speaker, you realize that in this House, when we are coming out with our committees, our committees do the oversight role. But these projects that are implemented by the East Africa community are hardly oversighted by any of our committees, meaning that they go unoversighted. On the other hand, IALA does not oversight them because the projects have been implemented in the individual counties. So, Mr. Speaker, this is something that I really want to believe that our House, this Parliament, and particularly your chair, Mr. Speaker, really must get into this, because they invest quite a bit of money. There's lots and lots of monies that are implemented by the community, and all these projects are not oversighted by any agency. EALA does not oversight them. Our committees here in the House does not oversight them. There have been a lot of projects, particularly there was a project that was in Lake Victoria for purposes of removing, harvesting hyacinth. That thing is maribound and nobody else can oversight it. There was a big project of reforestation that was being done by our Ministry of Environment. Nobody oversights that. There was a big project that was being done in Kisii and parts of Bomet for water. Large water projects that were being funded through the Arusha, through the East Africa community. They are not oversighted. EALA cannot oversight them because they are in our individual countries. On the other hand, we can't oversight them because they have been the source of funding is from the Secretariat in Arusha. The other thing, Mr. Speaker, I wanted to bring around is EALA stands really as the institution that we see in the community, particularly in the region. But the biggest problem we have is the amount of conflicts we have across the individual countries, and a lot of disharmony that we have many times between Tanzania and Kenya, between Uganda and Kenya. Hardly a week passes before we have issues of incidents across Lake Victoria. Hardly a week passes before we have issues across in Isibania, in Migori. Last week, there are big issues because Kenya had not done certain things that, on the other hand, Tanzania had done. So trucks of lorries were being cleared from on the side of the Tanzanian side, but on our side, they are not cleared. So, Mr. Speaker, as we look through this thing of EALA, I think we don't need just to go or look at EALA for purposes of EALA, constantly looking at the legislations and the bills that we have passed as part of the agenda, but they really need to have the agenda as part of these problems that are really issues that are really hampering the whole issue of integration. Mr. Speaker, those are two critical things that I wanted to bring around as we move towards electing our guys, our members to EALA. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Member for Bondo. The member for Tigania East, Mburi Aburi.
Thank you, Speaker. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for giving me this opportunity to make my contribution. Let me begin by congratulating the President for the many issues which he said his government will focus on in the next 5 years. One key issue is that, touching my heart, is that of pursuing transformation agenda, which will include an overhaul of the country, social security infrastructure to make it more inclusive. Mr. Speaker, sir, many Kenyans are facing serious socio-economical hardship. Since the economic model we have as created a huge gap between the poor and the rich. As we speak now, Mr. Speaker, most parts in the country are facing starvation and hunger due to prolonged drought. 2 weeks ago, Meru region
Yes, please. Point of order. Yes, Majority Leader.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. I really don't want to interrupt my good friend, the Honorable Mpuru Aburu. But, Honorable Speaker, the Honorable Mpuru is doing his third term. And to begin with, he should know that when I'm standing on a point of order, he should take his seat. Number two, Honorable Speaker, the Honorable Mpuru is really not helping our new members. It's understandable when a new member is reading notes. But when a member serving his third term, having served in EALA, stands in his place to read notes, we don't know from who or from where. Honorable Speaker, I think the Honorable Mpuru Aburu is completely out of order and misleading our new members, and he must not be allowed to be reading notes unless he makes disclosure who is the author of those notes.
For Tigania East, you are an old member of the House. The rules prohibit
Of course, I'm on of this House, Mr. Speaker, but allow me to read the statement because it's mine.
You will not be allowed. You are either debating the motion or reading a rehearsed speech which is not part of debate.
There is no problem, Mr. Speaker. I know he has my hand. Mr. Speaker, sir,
Yes.
I've stayed in the other for 5 years.
That's correct.
Yes, and I have, what I can say is that we have to support each other. There's no need of fighting each other in this parliament. Mr. Speaker, our majority leader, sometimes when he sees somebody speaking, he says that this man is not allowed to speak in this parliament because he has stayed there for 3 years, for 3 terms. But what I can say, I can tell my majority leader is that because he's very lucky because he gets the president. Now don't forget, Mr. Speaker, we supported Azimio. And this time I'm the party leader of Nopel Party, and now right now as I'm talking, we are supporting His Excellency, the President of this country. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honorable, you are done? Thank you. The Honorable Robert Mbui.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for the opportunity to also contribute. Mr. Speaker, I am surprised, Mr. Speaker, that one of our very close members has just defected on the floor of the House. The Honorable Mpuri Aburi. And yet he was supporting us and fighting very strongly on our side.
Order, honorable members, order.
Mr. Speaker.
Order, honorable members. Order, Robert Mbui. Order, honorable members. I honestly, as your speaker, want to follow the debate. And we can do so if the conversations are in lower tones than they are now. East African communities are the centerpiece of many of our hearts. And this is a very important motion. And I want to encourage you that the quality of people you will elect to East African Parliament must also be commensurate with the status of Kenya as the region superpower.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I want to begin by first supporting what the Honorable Wanjiko Moya raised, which is a matter, Mr. Speaker, of Kenya being the only country that cleanly removes every member elected to IALA and then brings in new members. And I think, Mr. Speaker, I wanted to say that for purposes...
From Honorable Mpuri. Can you give the microphone to the honorable member for Tigania East? I don't know where he's sitting. Honorable Mburi, put your card on press intervention so that I can give you the microphone. Honorable Aburi, you may sit down. Let the Honorable Robert Mbui continue.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It looks like technology is not in favor of my colleague, so please allow me to continue. Mr. Speaker, he only wants to complain because of a comment he made, and I made reference to it. Because he said that he was in Azimio, and now he's supporting His Excellency the President, so I said he seems to have defected on the floor. And if that is the issue, then I think it's really not serious. Mr. Speaker, so I'm supporting what Wanjiko Moya said about maintaining some of our members. And Mr. Speaker, also following what you have said, that we need to have quality members. I want to propose that when we start discussing these members that are going to IALA, to have good quality people, we have to have one institutional memory and people with quality. People with degrees in law would be an added advantage. People with degrees in international relations would be an added advantage. And our Wiper nominee is one such person, Mr. Speaker, sir. the Honorable Kennedy Kalonzo Musyoka, who was already in Yala. Mr. Speaker, I want to just mention two things about Yala that I think is important for members to know, even as we go there. First one, Mr. Speaker, is the issue of partner states payment. In the 11th Parliament, Mr. Speaker, I was in a committee of regional integration, and we realized that a lot of partner states do not even actually make the contributions to that for that community to exist. So, Mr. Speaker, as you go there, as we send members there, that is one of the issues that people need to address. And finally, Mr. Speaker, the members of Yala who are here have not said this, that one of the problems members have when they're elected to Yala is that they have no place to call home when they come back to the country. Mr. Speaker, the members of Yala, when they come here, they fall under a ministry, I think the Ministry of East African Community. Yet, Mr. Speaker, these are elected members of Parliament. It is important that we find a way so that they can also be catered for under the Parliamentary Service Commission, so that as they go there and as they come back, they are part and parcel of the leadership of this nation because they are members of Parliament. With those few remarks, Mr. Speaker, thank you and I support.
The Honourable Member for Kandui.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, sir, for granting me this opportunity to be able to address this House for the first time. It has been a long wait on the queue, but at least my time has come. Mr. Speaker, sir, first let me take this opportunity before I make my contribution to the motion before the House to thank the great people of Kandui for having elected me to this Parliament as their representative. It was a long journey. It wasn't a walk in the park, but I must say, Mr. Speaker, sir, I relied on the support of many, many members of Parliament who came out to campaign for me. Together with all the Kandui people, I say a big thank you. I must, at this juncture, Mr. Speaker, sir, to thank you most sincerely, being my mentor, my teacher, and my party leader, for the role you played to get me to this particular August House. It was not an easy assignment to remove my predecessor who had served in this House for 4 terms, 20 years, and a party leader to boot. I must thank the people of Kandui for that favor they granted me to represent them in this House. Turning to the motion before the House, Mr. Speaker, sir, you appreciate the role of the East African community in development matters to us in this particular region. The East African community is a critical component in fostering international trade, regional cooperation, and issues touching on cross-border trade. I must say that the names that have been given here are names that will actually be able to portray, to play a leading role in selecting up the members who will be at the East African Legislative Assembly. I had occasion to visit the East African Legislative Assembly, and I will say without contradiction that our members there, who were there previously, did not actually reflect critically the quality of Kenyans who are representing up in that particular assembly. I will say, Mr. Speaker, that having sat in that particular assembly, having sat in that particular assembly, I was worried particularly about the representatives who are representing this particular country. Mr. Speaker, I hope the committee that has been put in place and has been said by the members who have contributed before me will be able to measure up to the assignments that they will have and be able to reflect the true face of Kenya as they take up their assignments in that particular assembly. Finally, Mr. Speaker, sir, I wish to, as I close up on this, reiterate that as I join this assembly, I must be able to state that we must be able to work as a team to be able to deliver on the agenda for Kenyans. The agenda for Kenyans is basically fighting to ensure that we reduce the cost of living, to ensure that our children go to school, to ensure that our mama mbogas and border borders are able to earn a living. And to this, I'll support the Kenya Kwanza agenda that is towards ensuring that we establish a hustlers fund that will be able to assist the mama mbogas and the youth of this country to be able to develop up themselves and be able to move up. Mr. Speaker, sir, I wish also at this particular juncture to reiterate that as I come to this floor of this House, 3 critical issues are important for the people of Kandui. I start up with the issue of Nzoia Sugar Company. As we speak, Mr. Speaker, the farmers have not been paid. There is no board of management at Nzoia Sugar from the year 2019. The cane is rotting in farmers' farms. The children are not going to school. Mr. Speaker, I will want the head of state to ensure, as he assured the people of Kandui during the campaigns, that Nzoia Sugar Company is going to function and these problems are going to be solved so that the people of Kandui can be able to have value for their sweat. Secondly, Mr. Speaker, I wish to state that when we move around Kandui constituency, we have not been able to benefit from the last mile supply of electricity. I wish to state that, as it was stated up in the President's speech, we will be able not only to ensure that electricity reaches each and every corner of Kandui, but we will be able to have affordable electricity available to all residents of Kandui who have had a lot of faith by electing me in this particular House. Thirdly, we have heard, and we have heard from even the President's speech, that the issue of the national government CDF fund is a critical fund that has helped assist many other people in our constituencies. I will be at the forefront, Honorable Speaker, to ensure that we team up with all the other members of this particular House to ensure that we ring-fence the Constituency Development Fund to ensure that it assists our people the way it's expected to do. Finally, Mr. Speaker, I wish to state that a healthy nation is a wealthy nation. And at this particular juncture, we will want to move and ensure that the National Health Insurance Fund takes off and we ring-fence it from any other assaults that were there by people who are bringing, who are siphoning funds from that particular fund, because we must ensure that universal health care comes to fruition. Finally, Mr. Speaker, I wish to state that, finish my remarks by restating the words of Henry Ford, that coming together is a beginning, working together is progress, and keeping together is success. I wish to state that, as we state in the prayer we state every day here when we come to this particular House, we exist for the just government of the people, for the welfare of society and just government of the people. We hope we'll be able to rise to the occasion to ensure that we'll fulfill the promises made up to our people. That is all I wish to state, Mr. Speaker, sir. I support.
The Honorable Member for Njoro, Kadambi Chepkonyi.
Mr. Speaker, sir, thank you very much for giving me this opportunity. Once again, let me take this opportunity to congratulate you as our Speaker. Let me also take an opportunity to congratulate our Deputy Speaker, our lady. Let me also take an opportunity to thank every Kenyan for voting for our able President William Samoei Ruto. Let me also thank my people, Njoro constituency, for re-electing me once again as the Member of Parliament, Njoro constituency. I stand, Mr. Speaker, sir, to support the list, and I wish to thank you and take that short time. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, sir.
That is all. The Honorable Irene Mayaka nominated, but before she takes the floor, allow me to recognize the presence of Oloretet Primary School from Narok County, seated at the public gallery. Mayaka.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. I just wanted to give my contribution to the motion on the table on the East Africa members. And I just wanted to say, Honorable Speaker, that in my view, I think I agree with the members who say that we need to be very careful in terms of the qualifications that we give the members and those that we bring on board, because right now, one of the biggest issues when you look at some of the things that the East African Assembly has been able to do is that they face difficulties in terms of ensuring that they have policies in place that cut across all our countries, because the frameworks put in place are not usually very comprehensive. So mine is just to urge both sides of the House that ensure when you're bringing members on board that they have the prerequisite qualifications, so that we don't have members who just go there and tick box instead of doing the actual work. I submit. Thank you.
The Honourable Member for Kamkunji.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for the opportunity. Since it is my first opportunity to speak in the 13th Parliament, I also want to thank the great, wonderful people of Kamkunji for bringing me to this august house. I want to pledge that, as I have done before, I would work for them humbly and respectfully and work harder even for them in this Parliament. Speaking on the issue of the East African Legislative Assembly, I want to put this particular issue in the context, the global context, the continental context, and the regional context of the geopolitics of our country. And I think the East African community is one of the most important regional institutions, and perhaps the institution with the biggest potential in bringing together the people of the region, not only in terms of economic cooperation, but also eventually the main vision of the East African people is for an East African political federation. And knowing that, in fact, East Africa is our biggest trading partner and our biggest political allies, and the East African Legislative has been the assembly that legislates the laws of this region, it is very important that we send the best people, the best minds that we have in this country. And I must say that in the past elections that we had of the East African Legislative Assembly, unfortunately the case has always been to push people who have been rejected politically and to use the East African Legislative Assembly more like a garbage dump to get rid of people who perhaps have not been selected for leadership positions in our own country. And you know that the East African Legislative Assembly members are the face of Kenya. And what I think is that we must send the best minds that we have to be able to push the vision, the mission, and the aspiration of the East African people. If you send someone who has no clue, other than the fact that they have been given a position of payment and privilege, then we are failing in that particular objective. And I urge this House and the leadership of the political parties and the leadership of this country to take this particular matter very seriously and to send our best minds to represent us in the East African region, which is going to be a building block for the bigger vision of a united Africa that can play its role on the global arena, so that Africa can take its place in the international politics of the world, and we can be heard as a continent, and we can be players on the global stage. The East African community is just a beginning. It is the first steps for us to assert the fact that we want a stronger economic and political East Africa. Then we go to the Africa level, the Africa Union. And now we have the new trade agreement for the whole of Africa. The East African region will play an important role in that. And that's why I think we should be very, very serious in the people that we send there. It's not just a job for the boys and the girls. It's a job for people who can push us forward and can put our name up there and can develop laws and legislations that will lift up and make the East African region a regional power in Africa and a major player in global affairs. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
I'll give the Honorable Andrew Okwome.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, sir, for giving me the opportunity. Now, East African Community is a very important institution for the member states. I recall when the membership was still covering only 3 countries. And indeed, I also recall when Kenya was getting independence and East African Community was really the hope of the 3 countries that it would give us the federation. That has disappeared in the thin air, which is very disappointing. And because of this, I would really wish that as Kenya, we appoint people who can have a hope to unite the whole of East Africa, because what we see today is a conflict. If you take, for example, Lake Victoria, which should be uniting us, it has been a cause for some of the conflicts we have with Uganda and also with Tanzania. You remember Migingo? Most of the time wars are there. Some of the people come from Uganda, whatever they pretend to be. They arrest our people, they go with them to Uganda, and whatever they do with them, God knows. So I think we want people who can really issues regarding the problems we have as East African Community countries and find a solution. We also need to have people there who can unite us commercially. I heard our president speaking when he met his counterpart in Tanzania. He was crying for commercial unity, the trade. The East African currency that we used to have before the East African Community probably is one of the things that the current community should fight for, so that we have one currency, because that's what will also help us to ensure that the trade in East African Community countries can be viable and help the all the members in ensuring that we can have the East African Community of our hope, the community that can be of our dream, the community that can move us from where we are to somewhere that can help us all in the trade and, more importantly, political side. We would like a political unity. That's what I referred to earlier when I was talking of the federation. When we have political unity, there are many other goods that we can be able to achieve. We can achieve so much if we are united. I only believe that we are going to give our partners very able members to serve us in this important unity we have in the East African Community. Mr. Speaker, sir, thanks for having given me the opportunity, and I hope that my dream will be kept alive by those who will go to East African Community. Thank you.
The Honourable Member for Gilgil.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I also rise to support this nomination of these members, Mr. Speaker, and this list is very well thought out, and they know their work is also cut out, Mr. Speaker. And the issues that are being raised at the East Africa Community, Mr. Speaker, the people who go there must know that they have to defend the position that Kenya holds in terms of our bilateral and multilateral relations in Africa and East Africa specifically, Mr. Speaker. And I hope that the team will also look at all manners as it's stipulated in terms of balance, in terms of even getting new blood, even as we do with the institutional memory, Mr. Speaker. I hope that we can be able to also get new, fresh blood, to also get new ideas, to also take to Yala. Mr. Speaker, the issue of disputes that we have with our member states, Mr. Speaker, I think this is an issue that Yala members should be able to address with our neighbors. I mean, starting all the way from Migingo, starting from issues of trade and balances with us in Tanzania, issues of hadas, issues of maize, issues of even Maasais across the two countries. Mr. Speaker, we have had issues between us and Tanzania. I hope that these members will defend the integrity of the boundaries of this country. They will defend that the position Kenya holds, that they hold the aspirations of all Kenyans, Mr. Speaker, that we all don't always give in all the time and we become the underdog all the time, Mr. Speaker. I hope we can be able to reclaim the position that Kenya holds in IALA and in EAC, Mr. Speaker. With those few words, I support the committee and hope that this work could be expedited so that you are able to deal with the timelines at the right time. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. The member for Keses. The member for Keses. Where is he? He's not here. Wow. Then let me give the member for Malava who was soliciting for a chance to speak.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I also rise to support the committee members. And, Mr. Speaker, I would urge them to develop regulations that would guide the House when it comes to actually electing these particular persons. Because I recall, Mr. Speaker, in the last parliament, we talk of regional representation, gender, etc., etc. But, Mr. Speaker, in the last parliament, we voted actually 3 persons from one community to the East African Assembly. And we were almost voting in another 4th one if it were not an intervention that we do not have gender representation. So I would urge, Muya, you are very familiar with the case, you would actually help this parliament to ensure that the persons we are voting in, we have actually regional representation in the country. And the persons who will be voted in, I would also imagine, there are persons really who have to represent Kenyans very well. Because I recall sometimes during the last parliament, the then president of Tanzania, Magufuli, banned our chicks, 5,000 of them alive. I did not hear our representatives in the East African Assembly talking about it. He took away our 1,000 animals, cattle. I didn't hear any voice from our persons who are in the East African Assembly talking about it. So we would that, as Mbui was saying, that maybe the persons we also elect to the Assembly, there are persons really who have to represent our interests, speak about even the ills that are there that are affecting Kenyans. Otherwise, thank you, Mr. Speaker. I support the names.
Thank you. Member for Bomachoge Borabu.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I have been looking forward to this particular address. It's the first one. Very quickly, I'd like to support the appointment of the ad hoc committee on the election of the members to the IALA. Mr. Speaker, I want to start by thanking God for the miracle of my election into this House. Mr. Speaker, I'm the Honorable Nolfason Obadia Barongo, MP for Bomachoge Borabu. Mr. Speaker, my journey to this House is also stuff of dreams. I was a vegetable vendor before today, now by the grace of God, an MP. A humbling and inspiring story for another day. Mr. Speaker, like many before me, I'd like to congratulate you and your able deputy as the heads of this assembly. I pray God to grant you good health and wisdom as you lead us in the making of a better country. Mr. Speaker, allow me to profusely thank the people of Bochi, Bombaba, Magenche, and Bokimonge wards for putting aside clanism and charting a new path of unity for Bomachoge Borabu, and they did so, Mr. Speaker, emphatically but peacefully. I want to promise, Mr. Speaker, that I will serve them with diligence and humility. Mr. Speaker, let me also single out my wife and the kids, Jemima and the kids, my mom and dad, siblings, relatives, many friends, my campaign team full of young dreamers for pulling a memorable victory in this election, the ODM party and my leader, the Honorable Raila Amolo Odinga, for issuing me with a ticket that helped my election into this house. Mr. Speaker, sir, not to forget my worthy opponents who did not petition my election. To all of these persons, I would like to say thank you very much. Mr. Speaker, you may know that Bomachoge Borabu is one of two Bomachoges in Kisii County, the other being Bomachoge Chache, represented here by my brother Alpha Miruka. My constituency, Mr. Speaker, has experienced tribal clashes in the past because we border Maasais. Thankfully, lately, peace has prevailed and business has been booming. Mr. Speaker, my constituency boasts of a school called Rio Kindo High School. Mr. Speaker, in last year's KCSE, a staggering 476 students out of 485 managed to score C+ and above. Allow me, Mr. Speaker, to praise the head teacher and the staff and the community, most importantly the students, for these excellent results. Mr. Speaker, I also had the opportunity of touring my constituency over the weekend. Some schools could be improved. A case in point is a school called Riabu, which has been a beacon of education in my constituency for a long time. Mr. Speaker, it is unthinkable to think that NGCDF will not be there to rescue such schools as Riabu that truly need much improvement. Mr. Speaker, I will also champion the elevation of Kenya Polytechnic to a national polytechnic and the construction of Gesabakwa Institute so that our students who cannot make it to university can also pursue their careers there. Mr. Speaker, I would like to, in the interest of time, sign off by saying how privileged I am to be the representative of the good people of Bomachoge Borabu and Kenyans at large, and I hope that the discussions we will have here will be geared towards bettering the lives of our people. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you very much, Honorable Speaker. First, I would like to support the committee and congratulate the chair and the entire committee for being nominated and elected to this.
Honorable members who have already spoken, it's advisable to log out so that you decongest the screen. I see Honorable Wanji Kumuya still on the screen, unless you are anticipating to speak in the next motion, and several others. If you decongest the screen, you will help us in managing.
Okay, thank you. So I was congratulating the committee and also say that we are honored as a country today. I think we are hosting the Secretary General of the East African Community, Mr. Peter Mathuki, who is also Kenyan, who is in the country today with the Chief Justice of the East African Court. But Mr. Speaker, what I would like to state here is that as this committee gets down to work, there are very many important things that they need to do. We need to send a strong delegation to the East African community. As we do that, it is one onerous task that this committee has to ensure that they put together a criteria that brings us the best. While I want to acknowledge what my brother has said, Mbui, that we need to continuity in the East African community. It is sad that this is the only country that sweeps everybody out and brings in a new team. And therefore, when we get there as a country, we are disadvantaged because we have to start a fresh page. It is important that we retain 1 or 2 people at the East African community. I do not want to campaign for people there, but I think it is very important we do that. But again, I want to reiterate that we need to send quality representation at the East African Assembly. Quality representation. I think we had good representation in this assembly, and we look forward to having very good and quality representation. Mr. Speaker, sir, you know, during this time when IALA campaigns start, it is a very exciting time. And I want to urge the new members, when these campaigns for IALA start, please stay at the lobby, at the tea place.
Yes.
It is a very interesting time.
There's a point of order from the Honorable Wangwe. Give him.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I don't want to interrupt my colleague and very good friend, the Deputy Majority Leader, but I want to come to stand on Standing Order 83, read together with 95. Honorable Speaker, looking at the contribution of members towards this debate and the debate after this one, we look at the debate after Honorable Speaker as being very, very strongly also important, and I feel, Honorable Speaker, if we can call the mover to reply, so that we can also engage the next debate. Thank you, Honorable Speaker.
As I finish.
Thank you, the Honorable Wangwe. I see quite a bit of interest. What I'll do, I'll give, after the Honorable Baya, I'll give 3 on either side, then call the mover.
Okay, thank you. So I was asking...
You have been doing very well in terms of time. Nobody has gone for more than 5 minutes, which is very good.
Okay. So I was telling the new members that during that, please stay in the lobby so you hear the people that are campaigning, hear them out well, listen to them so that we come back here and elect quality people. But more so, please engage them well as they come for campaigns. There'll be very intense campaign at the lobby, at the T. Please stay there so that we end up selecting and electing people that are very good quality. But I want to wish the team that is going to do this job, the Wanjiku Muhia team, please do a good job for us as a country. Give this country honor by ensuring that we elect people that deserve to be in that assembly, not just because your party has said this person must go. This assembly must make that decision. I remember last election when we were in this chamber, it was about what the party has said, whether the person is quality or not, including the gentleman that my friend shot down. The party said, and therefore we went. I think this time we need to scrutinize everybody's CV. We look at the quality of persons we are selecting and taking there, because it's about country. It's not about party, and it's not about individuals. That's why this committee is a joint committee of the many parties. Let's not look at which party is sending who. Let's look at the quality of persons, but more so, hear the people when they come here in this chamber to campaign. And I wish those that will come to campaign well, and I wish the committee well as they do their job. I thank you, Honorable Speaker.
Honorable Oyula.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker, for giving me this opportunity to also contribute to this motion. Mr. Speaker, let me start by congratulating you and your deputy for having been elected to lead this House. Mr. Speaker, I also want to thank my people of Butula for giving me a second chance to represent them in this House. Mr. Speaker, Butula has been unfortunate in the past, but one goes only one time. But this time, they gave me a second chance. I want to thank them most sincerely and assure them that I will work with them very closely. Mr. Speaker, as for this motion, I want to support the committee that has been appointed, but add that we need to make sure that the people we take to the IALA are qualified. They can represent our country very well, particularly in trade between our country and the other partners. Mr. Speaker, the quality of the people we take to
EALA must be above board. We need to make sure that Kenya is well represented, that Kenya takes people who are going to lead the community into working together for the benefit of the people of East Africa. Mr. Speaker, we who live at the border with Uganda, we know what it is to be together with your neighbors. Mr. Speaker, if your neighbors are not cooperating with you, surely you may not have peace along your borders. Because of bad blood, you can get people fighting over very small issues. So let us have some people, Mr. Speaker, who will be good representatives of us at EALA. With those few remarks, Mr. Speaker, I thank you once more for giving me this opportunity, and I thank the people of Butula for electing me second time. Thank you.
Thank you, the Honorable Johanna Ngeno. Give him the mic.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you very much for giving me this opportunity to also ventilate on this EALA issue. Mr. Speaker, I wish to say from the onset that I have no issue with the committee or the select committee which is going to be picking these members. The only thing, Mr. Speaker, is like what my colleagues have discussed, is that we need to get serious on this East African Parliament. Mr. Speaker, there are so many issues which needs to be ventilated in that Parliament, and we seem to be taking it for granted. And that is why even the question of one dominion, one united East Africa working together, or having even one leadership, Mr. Speaker, we are not making any serious progress because the people who are in that Parliament, Mr. Speaker, may not be taking up serious matters. Mr. Speaker, remember we have so many issues like cross-border clashes. We have a market that we need to look at because we have so many. If we could do trade, very good trade with this within East Africa, Mr. Speaker, I think we'll make serious progress. In my opinion, Mr. Speaker, I wish, like when you look at the formation of this House, Mr. Speaker, we have a fairly young people. When you look at the Senate, Mr. Speaker, we have a middle-aged people. Mr. Speaker, I was thinking, this East African Parliament, we should send these older people, especially these people who've been contesting on presidency and all that, so that they can go and actually debate on heavy matters that touches on East Africa. Mr. Speaker, people like Wajakoya should be sent there, Mr. Speaker. I'm expecting in that list people like Wajakoya, people like Kalonzo Musyoka mwenyewe, people like Raila Odinga, people like Gideon Moi. These are the people, Mr. Speaker, I wish to see in that list because instead of leaving them to roam around our country and actually making our leadership a little bit disrupted, why don't we send these people to that Parliament so that they can be debating on serious matters affecting the 3 or 4 countries which are in East Africa? So, Mr. Speaker, my suggestion is that the parties which are going to be picking these individuals, if you please pick those people, pick those leaders. ODM should bring us here Raila Odinga. Wiper Party should bring us Kalonzo Musyoka. KANU should bring us Gideon Moi. You see, and even as UDA, we will bring the Kenya Kwanza. We will look maybe for Uhuru Kenyatta. If he wishes, he should also attend. He should be in that list. So Jubilee should bring us Uhuru Kenyatta because we don't want these great men, these statesmen to be roaming in the country and giving trouble to our president. They should be in East Africa, debating on matters that are affecting the 4 or 5 countries and actually ensuring that the rules and the laws that are made in those countries, that are made in that parliament, that affect the 4 countries are made properly. So, Mr. Speaker, that is my submission, and I'm looking forward to the day that we'll be vetting those members in this House. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Member for Taveta. Member for Taveta, where is he? He logged in and left. Oh, there you are.
Yeah. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for the opportunity to address you again. I want to contribute to the motion and agree with my colleagues who have stated earlier that we need competent people who are able to address issues of multilateral and bilateral interests of Kenya, Mr. Speaker. So it's who come from border towns like Taveta and other areas like Busia to be considered in those positions, Mr. Speaker. Thank you.
The Honorable Omboko Milemba.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. I was among the very earliest people here. And thank you for this opportunity you've given me to make contribution on this particular matter. Let me begin by congratulating and supporting the list that we have been given of the members who are sitting on that list. The list is so strong. At least I see 2 people with CBS. I also see Ma'am Muya, who has served in that particular assembly and who will be one of the co-chairs. The East African community is a very old institution. The old one did leave several marks in Kenya, including parts of Upper Hill, which we refer to as community. The new one, which began in 1999 and was actualized in 2000, is the one that established this legislative assembly under its Article 9 of its assembly constitution. And is one institution that is very important for our regional coordination, especially on matters culture, trade, economy, and politics. And therefore, I'm looking forward that this team of people will vet and bring us names that really qualify to sit in this assembly. One other yarn I've seen of members who have spoken on this is the fact that we need high quality and even members representing us here with very good level of esteem. I think the search by the immediate former person who has spoken, Dikir here, was just the yearning to find high quality people who can command certain respect within the East African community so that when they walk, when they speak, when they refer to matters Kenya and represent us, they can be felt heavily. So he may have not necessarily just been speaking about the old guys who were in the election recently, but what is the stature of the man we are taking to the East African Assembly? So that when he walks around, he's like an ambassador somewhat, who is actually representing the Kenyan interest. And therefore, by his looks, his posture, his experience, it's just enough to actually make representation better. So therefore, I would wish to ask that this committee does its work very well. And when it comes to the elections itself, members will vet these people and take very high quality people to the assembly. The East African community, and IALA in particular, is so important because there are so many matters that are affecting us. But let me deal with the positive ones, because whenever we talk about this assembly, we tend to deal with the conflict. But we really need now trade between Kenya and Uganda, which has been one of our highest traders with Kenya until when Britain took over. And we need Tanzania because of the high number of plenty of cereals in Tanzania. And we need other products from Congo, which is part of now the expanded East African IALA. And therefore, I want to believe that the people who will be elected to this particular assembly will be people who can tap good relations that can actually improve the movement of goods between the borders so that we benefit from the trade between the East African bloc, and create an assembly that will make laws that will move us towards even closer cooperation, like I had the issue of common currency, like I had the issue of removing the tariff barriers of trade, particularly between Kenya and Tanzania, where we have a lot of grains. I hear there are 14 trade barriers still existing which needs to be removed, and this will make us have a greater cooperation. Without much ado, Honorable Speaker, Madam Speaker, I beg to support. Thank you.
Three, Senator Rosalinda Soipan Tuya. 4, Senator Miraj Abdullahi Abdul Rahman. 5, Senator James Lomonen. 6, Senator Shakila